All right, well, I guess I've waited just about long enough, but now it's time. The official Uncle Lou preview and prediction for your 2021 national champion, Georgia Bulldogs. God, I love saying that. All right, college football fans, we're literally days away now from the official start of the 2022 college football season, with week 0 set to kick off this Saturday. And I've got some great news. This year, I've partnered with DraftKings Sportsbook. No matter who you root for, there's plenty of ways for you to cash in this football season. As teams kick off over the next couple of weeks, DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is going to put new customers in the center of the action with an opportunity to instantly turn $5 into $200 in free bets. And you heard me right. DraftKings is going to give all new customers $200 in free bets when you place any pregame $5 or more wager on the college football team of your choosing. Nebraska versus Northwestern in Ireland this Saturday. Nebraska's a 13-point favorite. I like the Cornhuskers. Plus, same game parlays. You can combine multiple bets from the same game to give yourself a shot at even bigger winnings all season long. DraftKings has been around forever, and you know the name. Your funds are safe, and you can withdraw whenever, wherever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers, make sure you're using the promo code UncleLou. That's one word, all uppercase letters, UncleLou, and you're going to receive $200 in free bets instantly when you place any $5 wager. That's promo code UncleLou only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Oh, yeah, good morning, that is Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and guess what? I'm live for you on LouTube today. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Also, in addition to that as well, hey, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. Did you know I post college football videos almost every single day of the year? And some of them are even watchable. I don't know about this one. You can let me know in the comments down below at the end of this video where you thought it was watchable or not. And be sure to let me know what you think I got right and what you think I got wrong. But up today, I am going to give you a preview and prediction for the 2022 Georgia Bulldogs college football regular season. Just like in all of these preview and prediction videos that I've done, I'm going to talk a little bit about the offense, the defense, and the coaching staff. Then I'm going to put the record up on the screen. I'm going to go through it week by week and give you a winner and a loser for every single game 2022 Georgia Bulldogs. All right, I usually start with the offense when I do these videos, but this is Georgia we're talking about here. I'm going to start with the defense. And yes, the majority of Georgia's defense from last year has gone off to the NFL. Let's see. The entire defensive line, right? Jordan Davis in the middle, Devontae Wyatt on one side, Trayvon Walker on the other, gone off to the NFL. Not just the 2 starting inside linebackers, but the top 3 inside linebackers. Nakobe Dean, Channing Tindall, and Quay Walker, all gone off to the NFL. Starting cornerback Darion Kendrick, gone off to the NFL. Starting safety Lewis Seen, gone off to the NFL. So, stating the obvious here, Georgia has a lot to make up on defense this year compared to last year. Losing all of that talent to the NFL is going to matter. The question really, when you're talking about Georgia's defense to me, is not is it going to drop off from last year. Clearly, it's going to drop off from last year. You don't have a generational defense like Georgia had last year, lose all those players and expect a repeat of the same defensive performance the following year. So the question is, how much of a drop-off is there going to be? Well, the bad news is you lose all those players, but there's some good news. Georgia recruits at an elite level. Again, if you've been following college football for any amount of time at all, this is something you already know. If you go back and you look at Georgia's last 4 recruiting classes, they have a number 1 ranked class, a number 2 ranked class, a number 3 ranked class, and a number 4 ranked class. Not in that order, but their last 4 classes have been ranked 1, 2, 3, and 4. Plenty of talent on this roster. Some of it is young, some of it is inexperienced. Georgia also rotates a ton of players defensively during the game, and I'm not just talking about the second halves or fourth quarters of blowouts. I'll just give you one example here, but Jordan Davis, starting nose tackle, whatever, defensive tackle, whatever you want to call him, off to the NFL. His backup, Jalen Carter, played a ton last year, and I'm not just in the second half. In fact, Jordan Davis actually played less than half of Georgia's snaps defensively last year. Jalen Carter played the majority of the other half, and the AP just released their preseason All-American rankings, and guess who's on there? Jalen Carter, a guy that really has never started a college football game, but he has played a ton. There are some people that think Jalen Carter was the most talented person on Georgia's defense last year. I don't know if I'm willing to go that far. There's people that think, he's better than Jordan Davis. We'll see. I've got to see that to believe it, but the point being, he's really, really good, and there's a lot of players on Georgia's defense that got a lot of playing time last year early in games that are going to have to step up and start this year. There's some good news. There's some players returning on Georgia's defense as well. Both the outside linebackers return. Nolan Smith on one side, Robert Beal on the other. Robert Beal, 6-year guy actually led the team in sacks last year. He's back as one outside pass rusher. Nolan Smith, former number 1 rated recruit in America, the year he came out, is on the other side. Everybody's been kind of waiting on Nolan Smith to have that breakout year. It was a little bit surprising that he decided to come back for his senior year, but it's good news for Georgia. He did come back, so you get both those guys back. Keely Ringo is back, started last year opposite Darion Kendrick at the other corner position. Of course, had the pick 6 in the national championship game. And a couple of safeties that played a lot last year. Dan Jackson is back. Chris Smith is back. William Poole is back. So there's a lot of players with a lot of experience on this defense, just not necessarily starting experience. The one area on Georgia's defense that really concerns me, and I think most people the most, is inside linebacker. Because like I mentioned before, it's not just losing the 2 starting inside linebackers. Georgia lost their top 3 inside linebackers, Nakobe Dean, Channing Tindall, Quay Walker, all gone to the NFL. A lot of talent in Georgia's inside linebacker room. They've recruited really, really well at that position. Guys like Pop Johnson, Smile Munding, Xavier Sori. I mean, these are highly rated, highly recruited guys with a ton of potential and upside. But they've not really done that much on Saturdays. And until you see somebody do it in college, it's hard to be completely confident in that group as a whole. They've obviously got the talent, the potential, the physical skills to do what they need to do at inside linebacker. They just need the experience. They just need the opportunity to prove themselves. They're going to get an opportunity. Early in the season, Georgia's got, they open up with Oregon, so no real time to kind of test the waters. Georgia's got to be ready to go. Week 1, that defense is going to get tested early in the season, and we'll see. It's not going to be last year's defense, ranked number 1 in almost every single category, only giving up 10 points per game over the course of the season. So again, back to the beginning when I was talking about the defense. Is Georgia's defense going to be as good in 22 as it was in 21? No, it's going to be a drop-off. The only question is how much, right? So they gave up 10 points per game last year. So they give up 14 this year, 17. Well, we don't know. The point is, Georgia's defense is not going to fall off of a cliff. It's not going to fall off the face of the earth. It's not going to be an LSU 2019 situation where offensively, they were generationally good in 2019 and then the offense just disappeared in 2020. That's not going to happen with Georgia's defense. They're too deep, too talented, recruit too well, and they're too well coached for that to happen. So how much will the drop-off be? Will they be the 5th best defense in the country, the 10th best, 15th best? We're going to find those things out as the season goes along, but I don't expect the drop-off to be drastic. Now, over on the offensive side of the ball, unlike the defense, you get a majority of the production back on offense. We'll start with the few guys that Georgia did lose. They lost running backs Zamir White and James Cook to the NFL. While they were technically the starting running backs, Georgia rotated 4 running backs in and out last year. The other 2, Kendall Milton and Kenny McIntosh, they're still at Georgia. So they'll be 1A and 1B, right? Georgia really hasn't had a running back 1 in a long time. It's been sort of a running back 1A and 1B situation going back to, Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. Maybe Nick Chubb got the first carry of a game in week 1. Maybe Sony Michel got the first carry of a game in week 2. And it's kind of been that way for the past 4 or 5 years. And I think it'll be a similar situation this year with Kendall Milton and Kenny McIntosh. Both are really, really good, both with pro potential. Behind them is Dejon Edwards, who was the 5th string last year. He was sort of the guy that came in the 4th quarter of a lot of the blowouts that Georgia was involved in and kind of ran out the clock. And there's a true freshman that I think is going to be too talented to keep off the field. I don't expect him to start, but Branson Robinson could be the real deal. He's built like Nick Chubb. I'm not comparing him to Nick Chubb in terms of a talent perspective or trying to tell you that he's going to be as good as Nick Chubb or anything like that. But when you look at him, he looks like Nick Chubb, and all indications are from summer and fall camp that he's looked really, really good at Georgia practice. Now, he didn't early enroll, so he missed spring, so that does set him behind a little bit in terms of the playbook and blocking assignments and things like that. So we'll see over the course of the season how much they try to work him in. But again, I think he's just too talented to keep off the field. Offensive line-wise, Georgia returns 3 of 5 starters. The 4th started 4 games last year, so he didn't start every game, but he started 4, and he played in the national championship game, Broderick Jones. So Georgia's going to have one of, if not the best offensive lines in the country. I don't care where you look, these preseason publications and rankings that people like to do where they rank position units, you're going to see Georgia 1st, 2nd, or 3rd nationally in terms of offensive line, no matter where you look. And they're 1st in the majority of rankings that you see. Their offensive line is going to be really, really good. Georgia didn't have the greatest year last year rushing the ball. And whether Kendall Milton and Kenny McIntosh are a little bit better or a little bit worse than James Cook and Zamir White, I think Georgia offensively will be a better rushing team in 2022 than they were in 2021, specifically because of how good this offensive line is going to be. Talk about the wide receivers. Georgia lost 2. George Pickens to the NFL and Jermaine Burton to Alabama. So we'll start with George Pickens. There's no doubt about it that George Pickens might be the most talented wide receiver Georgia's ever had. I mean, you're talking about people like A.J. Green, Hines Ward played some wide receiver, Terrence Edwards back in the early 2000s. He's every bit as good as all of those guys, if not better. So does Georgia have anybody on its roster that can replace George Pickens? No. I mean, Georgia doesn't get a whole lot of elite, super talented wide receiver recruits because of the style of offense and the philosophy offensively that they have. So no, there's no one that can replace George Pickens. So what are we losing? Well, we're losing about 5 catches from last year. Unfortunately, as good as George Pickens was, he just couldn't get on the field. He sat out all year until the SEC championship game. He played a snap or 2. Played a couple of, I think he had a couple of catches against Michigan in the first round of the playoffs, and then he had 1 catch against Alabama in the national title game. He just didn't play that much. So while I hate losing him because of the talent and the potential that he had, losing him, Georgia's not really losing any production by losing a George Pickens because unfortunately he wasn't able to play. Jermaine Burton, on the other hand, was Georgia's leading receiver last year in terms of receiving yards. I think he had about 455 receiving yards. He's a good wide receiver. He's not great. And I'm not knocking Jermaine Burton. I love Jermaine Burton. The reality is Georgia just doesn't have any great wide receivers outside of George Pickens, right? And I'm going to go through the wide receivers they do have here in a second. But Jermaine Burton is really, really good. He's not great. He's not Jamison Williams or Jerry Jeudy, good. Like if that's what Alabama fans are expecting from him, I think they're going to be disappointed. Now, he's going to put up way better numbers, I think, at Alabama than he did at Georgia because he's got Bryce Young throwing in the ball and an offensive philosophy that suits wide receivers. So I understand why he went there. I do think his numbers will take a huge jump, and he's likely to get some NFL attention because of it. And so losing him does hurt from a production standpoint. Like I said, 450 yards leading wide receiver. But we had 3-4 other wide receivers that had between 300 and 400 yards. So Georgia, kind of a wide receiver by committee approach last year. The rest of them are all still there. Ladd McConkey and A.D. Mitchell were freshmen last year. They started the majority of games. A.D. Mitchell scored a touchdown in the national title game against Alabama to give Georgia the lead in the fourth quarter of that game. He's back. Ladd McConkey is back. Dominic Blaylock, it looks like, is finally healthy. Another Georgia wide receiver that's had a hard time getting on the field, hard time staying healthy. It looks like he's healthy and ready to go. Kearis Jackson is back for what seems like his 10th year at Georgia. He's back. Marcus Rosemy St. Jack. And there always seems to be a freshman or two at UGA who end up playing a lot at wide receiver. We'll see who that ends up being for Georgia this year, but so does Georgia have a wide receiver room like Ohio State? No. Ohio State's got 5, elite NFL-bound wide receivers. Georgia might not have that, but they've got experienced wide receivers who have proven that they can get the job done. And, of course, you're looking at the tight ends, they're the best tight end group in America, and no one else even comes close. Brock Bowers destroyed every tight end receiving record on the books at UGA last year as a true freshman, almost 900 yards receiving, ton of touchdowns. Eric Gilbert, who sat out last year for personal reasons, is back. And again, if you go and look at all the practice reports going back to the spring, summer camp, now fall practice, Eric Gilbert is just an absolute freak who is set to have a huge year at UGA. Darnell Washington, 6'8". He's just, he's the exact same size and weight as LeBron James. And he plays tight end. It's an absolute elite run blocking tight end and a problem and a mismatch in the red zone for defenders as well with some jump balls. I think all 3 of those guys are NFL bound, and there's a true freshman sort of waiting in the wings, Oscar Delp, that was the number 1 tight end recruit in America coming out of high school last year. I don't know how much he's going to get on the field because of the 3 guys that are in front of him, but he's going to be really, really good whenever his time comes. He'll probably play some this year, particularly in the second half of games. And Georgia's going to run a ton of 2 and even 3 tight end sets this year. And defenses are going to have a really hard time, I think, trying to handle the Georgia offense when you've got potentially Darnell Washington with his hand in the ground, tight to the tackle. Brock Bowers as a split end on one side and maybe Eric Gilbert split on the other. Defenses are going to have to make a decision. Do they want to go nickel or dime and try to put a DB on those guys? Players with some elite cover skills that can try to cover those guys. Well, those people are going to be too small to cover those tight ends. Do they put linebackers or safeties on them who have a little bit bigger bodies? Well, they're probably not fast or quick enough to cover these tight ends. It's going to create a lot of mismatches in Georgia's favor with these 3 tight end sets that I expect Georgia to run this year. Coaching staff-wise, much of the coaching staff stays intact, except, of course, defensive coordinator Dan Lanning off to Eugene, Oregon. He took the head coaching job for the Ducks after last season ended. Georgia's not going to be hurting defensively. Glenn Schumann, Will Muschamp. I mean, just a list of coaches on Georgia's defensive staff is just incredible. And if you've been, again, following Kirby Smart going all the way back to his days at Alabama under Nick Saban, Kirby Smart's going to have a good defense regardless of who the defensive coordinator is. This is his third defensive coordinator he's on now. Mel Tucker, who's now one of the highest paid head coaches in the country at Michigan State. Dan Lanning, the last few years, now a head coach at Oregon. So Georgia's defense has not skipped a beat with changing defensive coordinators, and I expect that to be the case here. Georgia's defense should keep on rolling. All right, let's put Georgia's schedule up on the screen and go through it game by game and see what type of record Georgia might end up having. I mentioned DraftKings earlier in the video. Make sure you're clicking the link in the description below and check them out. But according to DraftKings, the over-under win total for Georgia in the regular season this year, 10.5. So if you think they're going to win, 11 games or more, you would bet the over. If you think they're going to win 10 games or less, you'd bet the under. But 10.5 is the over-under. Same over-under they have for teams like Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, all those teams lumped around the 10.5 range. And look, you see the schedule. I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend this is the world's toughest schedule, okay? There are some teams on Georgia's schedule this year that typically are pretty good that right now aren't. Auburn, Florida being two. Those are typically top 25 teams. Neither one of them ranked in the preseason top 25 AP poll right now. The only two ranked teams you see on this schedule right now, Oregon and Kentucky. Now, I think there's some teams that Georgia plays later in the year that could potentially be ranked by the time Georgia plays them. Tennessee, Mississippi State. So we'll see what the strength of schedule looks like at the end of the year. But clearly, right now, this looks like a very workable schedule for the University of Georgia. And I've heard some people say, well, this is bad for Georgia because they're just going to cruise through the regular season, not having to play anybody. And then when they do have to play somebody, they're not going to know how to react or whatever. Well, it was sort of the same situation last year, right? I mean, Georgia had that week one game against Clemson that they won 10-3. That was kind of a weird game. Both teams played real conservative and kind of close to the vest. Of course, we found out later that Clemson's quarterback was absolutely horrible, and Georgia's quarterback was hurt, JT Daniels. So how much that had to do with it, I don't know. But Georgia won that game 10-3. But then listen to the scores of the Georgia games every single week after that. 56-7, 40-13, 62-0, 37-0, 34-10, 30-13, 34-7, 43-6, 41-17, 56-7, 45-0. That was Georgia's regular season last year. Then, of course, they lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game, but they played Michigan in round one of the playoffs and blew them out 34-11. Played Alabama in a rematch in the national title game and blew them out 33-18. And yes, that's a blowout, no matter how mad it makes you. So look, the schedule is what it is. I mean, there's nothing Georgia can do about how terrible Auburn is or there's nothing Georgia can do about whether or not Florida is ranked. The schedule is what it is. All Georgia can do is schedule their non-con opponents. Georgia plays 4 non-con opponents a year. Georgia's playing 2 Power 5 non-con opponents out of those 4 games this year. Oregon in week 1, Georgia Tech at the end of the year. And again, there's nothing Georgia can do about how bad Georgia Tech is. But, last year, Georgia schedules a top 5 Clemson team week 1. This year, top 10, top 15-ish type Oregon team week 1. Georgia can only control what it can control. It really doesn't hurt my feelings at all that South Carolina and Tennessee and Auburn and Florida and Vandy and Mizzou are terrible. It just doesn't bother me at all. So let's go through this thing week by week and see what Georgia's final regular season record might be. Now, Georgia's going to be double-digit favorites in every one of these games unless something weird happens during the season. But that doesn't mean they're going to go 12-0. It's extremely hard to go 12-0. I've done an Alabama version of this video. I've got Alabama at 11-1 with a loss on the road at Ole Miss. I've done a Clemson version of this video. I've got them 11-1. I believe the only team I've predicted to go 12-0 so far is Ohio State. I did predict them to go 12-0. It's just really hard to go 12-0. Georgia did it last year, but it's the first time they've ever done it. 12-0. They were undefeated regular season in 1980 as well, but you didn't play 12 games back then. It's just really hard to go undefeated. It's hard to do it once, never mind 2 years in a row. So would I be shocked if Georgia lost one of these games? No, wouldn't be shocked at all. Would I be shocked if Georgia lost 3 of these games? Yes, I'd be blown away. It's going to be a coaching failure of biblical proportions if Georgia somehow loses 3 games this season. There's just no other way to explain a 9-3 Georgia season, given the talent that they have, especially what they have returning offensively, and the overall weakness of the schedule relative to some other teams. So 9-3 would be an absolute disaster. 12-0 is possible. It's just really hard to do. They'll probably be double-digit favorites in every game. So let's start with the Oregon game here. I think Georgia beats Oregon. I mean, I've been talking about this game for 8 months, so it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody to hear me say that. This is just a tough spot for Oregon. Dan Lanning, I like Dan Lanning. He's a great defensive mind and defensive coordinator. We just never know how that's going to translate to head coaching. Some coordinators move on to become a head coach and are great. Kirby Smart, Nick Saban. I mean, there's a bunch of examples. Some elite, great defensive-minded coordinators move on to become a head coach and fall on their face. Will Muschamp, Jeremy Pruitt come to mind. So you just never know. And this is a tough spot to have to play or coach your first ever game as a head coach all the way across the country against a top 3 Georgia team that's just absolutely loaded. I think Oregon's got some talent. In fact, if you look at the 24/7 talent rankings, which is basically a cumulative score of the last 4 recruiting classes plus transfers in and transfers out. It takes all that into account, and it sort of ranks the teams based on talent. Oregon's about the 9th or 10th most talented team. Well, last year they were. They haven't updated the rankings yet for 2022. So they recruit at an elite level. I mean, Mario Cristobal was bringing 5 stars in there. Some of them are still there. They've got a 5-star quarterback, although we're not sure if it's going to be him or Bo Nix that starts. I tend to think it's going to be Bo Nix, but they do have a 5-star sophomore, I believe, quarterback that is supposed to be pretty good, and Dan Lanning hasn't announced a starting quarterback yet, although, like I said, be surprised if it's not Bo Nix. Talk more about him in a second. Justin Flo on defense, Noah Sewell. Losing Kayvon Thibodeau will hurt Oregon. I mean, there's not too many people that have a Kayvon Thibodeau laying around. You lose that's just not easy to replace. But I think Oregon's going to be a good team along both lines of scrimmage and defensively with the linebackers. We got a little question or concern about their secondary. And I think their running game is going to take a huge step back regardless of who the quarterback is. Now, Bo Nix will create some plays with his legs and maybe help you in your run numbers there. But in terms of the running backs and the rushing totals, you lost your 2 top running backs from last year. C.J. Verdell went off to the NFL. Travis Dye, for whatever reason, decided to transfer to Southern Cal. So you got 2 new running backs. You do return most of your offensive line, and I think your offensive line will be good. I just don't think the running backs are going to give you the production that the 2 you lost gave you last year. Wide receivers, you've got some talent. Some of it is young and inexperienced, but you got some playmakers there. If Bo Nix is the starter, I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing for Oregon. It's not really my job to judge that in the preseason. Oregon fans can argue about that amongst themselves, who they'd rather see play quarterback, Bo Nix or the 5-star, the sophomore, whatever, isn't it Ty Simpson? I think his name. I'm probably getting that wrong. I think it's Ty Simpson. I can tell you as a Georgia fan, I've been watching Bo Nix play for 3 years. He's been the starter at Auburn for 3 years. He's had some good moments. He's had some bad moments. Overall, he's been underwhelming, in my opinion, in his time at Auburn. He's played Georgia 3 times. Georgia's beat him 3 times. He's never scored more than 17 points. Auburn didn't score more than 17 points with him at quarterback in the 3 games he played against Georgia. He has not played well against Georgia at all. He actually played Oregon, I believe, in his first ever game as a starter. His freshman year, he got the start. I think it was week 1. They played Oregon. It might have been week 2, but I think it was week 1. And Auburn won the game, but Oregon should have won the game, right? You remember, if you're an Oregon fan, you remember, but Oregon was winning the game. Auburn had the ball at the end on around midfield, maybe 40, 45-yard line, something like that. Bo Nix ran around in the backfield like a chicken with his head cut off, which he's still doing, by the way, on almost every other play. Basically covered up his eyes and threw the ball up for grabs. An Auburn receiver, happened to come down with it right around the goal line, and Auburn won the game. And Bo Nix was a hero. Well, that was a terrible play by Bo Nix. It was a terrible decision to throw the ball. It was a terrible throw. He threw into double coverage, and nothing about it was good except the outcome. And that sort of created this legend of Bo Nix type thing for about a year, but it wore off pretty quick. Like I said, I just don't think he has lived up to what some people thought he would do. Now, sometimes a change of scenery can help people. We'll see if that's the case with Bo Nix in Oregon. I just can't see Oregon winning this game. Georgia's a 17 and a half point favorite. I don't know if Georgia will win by that much, but I don't think this will be a close game in the second half. I think Georgia wins by at least 2 touchdowns. They're 1-0. Samford in week 2, an FCS opponent. Georgia will win this one. They'll score as many as they want, and Samford won't score at all. Week 3 at South Carolina. This is one of the games I tend to hear some people say Georgia might need to watch out for or be careful about. They could potentially lose this one. It's tough to play on the road at South Carolina, all this kind of thing. South Carolina's just way outmatched in this game. And if you look at South Carolina's schedule, the week before they host Georgia, they have to travel to Arkansas. Arkansas might be the most physical team in the SEC, more physical than Georgia or Alabama or whoever you want to name. They're up there with Georgia and Alabama in terms of their physical style of play. They've got one of, if not the best run games in the SEC. That quarterback is built like a linebacker. South Carolina, win or lose that game on the road at Arkansas, they're going to come out of that game a little beat up. They get no time to recover, and they have to host Georgia the following week. I just think it's bad timing for South Carolina. That's great that they got Spencer Rattler, one of the best players probably that they've ever had, at least in terms of recruiting rankings. He's right up there with Jadeveon Clowney in the most highly ranked or rated player ever to come through South Carolina. And I think that's a huge upgrade for them at the quarterback position versus what they had last year, which is a rotating cast of people that didn't know what the hell they were doing. I think started 4 different people at quarterback last year. So I like that. I think Spencer Rattler can turn things around from what he was doing at Oklahoma and have a pretty decent year at South Carolina. A pretty decent year at South Carolina doesn't equal winning or beating Georgia. I think Georgia wins that game. They're 3-0. And they play Kent State at home, group of 5 team. Again, outmatched. Georgia will score as much as they want. Kent State will be lucky to score at all. On the road at Mizzou, probably the worst team in the SEC, not named Vandy. Some people tell me, well, Missouri's headed in the right direction. That might be true. They might be headed in the right direction, but the destination is still a million miles down the road. In other words, they might be headed in the right direction, but they're not close, in my opinion, especially not to being competitive with the elite teams. I think Georgia will blow them out. It is on the road at Missouri. Missouri really is one of the most underwhelming road environments in the SEC. Them and Vandy, not much of a home field advantage or crowd factor at Mizzou or at Vandy. I think Georgia gets an easy win there. Then we host Auburn. Have people telling me Auburn's going to be 5-0 when this game is played. Maybe, but that means they would have beaten Penn State and LSU. I don't see that happening. There are other 3 games they should win, no doubt about it. But I would be shocked if they beat Penn State and LSU. Maybe they beat one of them and they're 4-1. Auburn's schedule is backloaded. The majority of Auburn's tough games are at the end of the year. I don't really think it matters what Auburn's record is here. Again, they have to come into Sanford Stadium, into Athens. Georgia has absolutely owned Auburn over the last 15 years. I think Georgia's 13-3 against them in the last 16 years or something like that. Just absolutely dominated this series lately. I don't see that changing this year. I think Auburn's going to be well below what they normally are. I think Brian Harsin is likely going to find himself out of a job at the end of the year. I don't see Auburn beating Georgia in Athens. And then we play Vandy, again, the worst team in the league. Georgia will absolutely destroy them. This will be a great game for all the backups to get a lot of action in the second half. And then Georgia hits the bye week. Georgia has their bye week the same time every single year, right before the Florida game. Florida game always falls around Halloween, which is week 6, week 7, week 8, depending on how the college football calendar falls in a given year. I like Georgia having their bye week here. It's just about in the middle of the season. So you play 5, 6, 7 games, whatever it is. You get a break, rest some guys up, maybe some injuries can heal, things like that. And it's always good to have a bye week before a rivalry game. And regardless of what anybody thinks about what Florida is this year, this is still a big game every time it's played. I like where the bye week falls. Florida's not beating Georgia. Anthony Richardson would have to, even if Anthony Richardson is every bit as good as the most optimistic Florida fans think he's going to be this year, it wouldn't be enough. There's just not enough around him. Dan Mullen was fired last year, and the Florida fans were yelling about it all season long. And what was the main reason they wanted him gone? He couldn't recruit. That's not me saying that. That's Florida fans saying, he can't recruit, he can't recruit, he can't recruit. Well, you can't spend 6 months telling me your head coach can't recruit, and then the following year try to tell me you're loaded with talent. You're not. You got issues at playmaker on the outside at wide receiver. I think you've got issues along the offensive line. I think Florida might be one of the better running teams in the SEC this year because if nothing else, Anthony Richardson is going to give you that. He's like that quarterback from Arkansas. He's a big body. He's not, Stetson Bennett can run around too, but he's 5'8", 160 pounds. He can't take too many big hits, Anthony Richardson is a big boy. He's not afraid to take a hit. In fact, he can deliver some hits. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Florida's ground game be much better than it was last year, particularly because of Anthony Richardson. But I've got to see Anthony Richardson be a quarterback before I can completely buy into the idea that he's going to be this amazing Heisman candidate, right? I'll agree. He's got a ton of potential, a huge upside, all the talent in the world, all the physical skills you look for in a mobile quarterback. He could throw the ball a million miles. I get all that. He could do all that last year, too. And he had 7 turnovers and 6 interceptions or whatever it was. It just wasn't good. Once or twice a game, he would make a play that made you go, oh, my God, wow. Did you just see what he did? Like, that was amazing. But then another 2 or 3 times a game, he would make you just scratch your head like, what the hell were you thinking type of deal. If he can get rid of all the bad stuff and do a lot more of the really, really good stuff, he'll be great. I just don't think that's enough for Florida to compete or beat a team, compete with or beat a team like UGA. I think Florida's got some issues defensively too at all three levels. I like Brenton Cox. I'm drawing a blank on the inside linebacker's name, but I like him too. But they don't have the secondary that they've had in years past. That could be a problem against a team like Georgia this year, which if they wanted to could have their best year throwing the ball I think they've had in a long, long time. I can't see Florida getting the win here. But let me just say something real quick about these 4 games here coming out of the bye week. Florida, neutral site. Tennessee at home, at Mississippi State, at Kentucky. You say whatever you want about Georgia's schedule, and I'm going to agree with most everything you say. That's a tough 4 stretch of games right there for Georgia. And I would be surprised if they made it through these 4 games without a loss. If Georgia loses a game, because after that it's Georgia Tech, and what are we waiting on? Georgia's going to win that game by 50. They're going to blow them out. That game, so forget that game. Let's just talk about these 4 games here, games 8, 9, 10, and 11. Florida, Tennessee, Mississippi State, Kentucky. If Georgia loses a game, it's going to be one of these 4. That's my honest opinion. I don't think Oregon is going to be able to win in week 1. Dan Lanning's first game as a head coach, basically a home game for Georgia. I don't think South Carolina's talented enough to beat them. They're not going to lose to Missouri. Auburn is falling apart, and Vandy is Vandy. They're not going to lose before the bye week. If they lose a game, it's going to be one of these 4 games in a row right after the bye week. Only one of those games is in Athens. The other 3 are on the road. One's a neutral site, 2 are true road games. Already told you I think we're going to beat Florida. Let's talk about the Tennessee game. Tennessee has the offense you have to beat Georgia. You cannot run the ball on Georgia. You just can't. And has nothing to do specifically with last year's defense. You just go back over the last 4 or 5 years, really all the way back to 2017. No one has been able to successfully run the ball on Georgia. I don't think that's changing this year. You have to have a playmaking, dynamic quarterback. You have to have the ability to spread the field horizontally with wide receivers and vertically with speed. It takes a Bryce Young and Jamison Williams type combo to beat Georgia right now. Running the ball is a waste of time almost against Georgia. I mean, you have to do it to, quote unquote, keep the defense honest or whatever. So Tennessee's got the kind of offense and the kind of quarterback and a really good wide receiver in Cedric Tillman that it takes to be successful against Georgia and win. The problem is, there's 2 problems I see with this game. Number 1 is Tennessee's defense, and number 2 is the fact that the game is in Athens. Georgia hasn't lost in Athens since 2019. That was against a 3-win South Carolina team. And I'll tell you right now, if Georgia comes out and does what they did in that game in any of these home games, they'll lose them. Jake Fromm turned the ball over 3 or 4 times. We couldn't do anything offensively. Rodrigo Blankenship was missing field goals. We only gave up 1 offensive touchdown to South Carolina in that game, and we still found a way to lose. That's how bad we played. If we do that, yeah, we'll lose. But short of that, it's hard to beat Georgia at home. I can't pick Tennessee to do it. I think Tennessee is going to have a really good year. I think they're going to be favored in 10 out of 12 games. Could potentially go 9-3, maybe 10-2 if everything falls their way. But I think they're probably more likely to go 9-3. I think they probably lose to Georgia, Alabama, and just whatever other team somewhere along the way. But I think they're going to be good. I just don't think they have what it takes defensively to beat and hang with Georgia over 4 quarters. Last year when we played Tennessee, they scored on their first possession of the game. They didn't score again until the last possession of the game when we were up by 40 points and the game was over. I'm not saying that's going to happen again. If Tennessee wins this game, though, it's going to be 45-40, 52-45, 47-44, right? That's the only way Tennessee can win this game. If Georgia wins this game, it's going to be 34-17, 38-21, that kind of thing. I don't think Tennessee defensively yet this year has the talent or the depth to beat Georgia. I think Georgia beats Tennessee. On the road at Mississippi State. This is a tricky game because it's a road game in the SEC against a team that Georgia's unfamiliar with because we don't play Mississippi State but once every 6 or 7 years, and we only play at Mississippi State once every 12 or 13 years because of the way the SEC scheduling is set up. Now, that's going to change here in a couple of years when Texas and Oklahoma come in and the SEC goes to a different scheduling model. But point is, this isn't a place where Georgia's used to playing. And like Tennessee, Mississippi State's got the kind of offense and the kind of quarterback that you need to beat Georgia. And I think they do it. I think Georgia loses this game on the road to Mississippi State. I don't think Mississippi State is a top 10 team. I think Mississippi State is a borderline top 25 team. But Will Rogers is going to throw for 5,000 yards. He's going to throw the ball 50 times against Georgia. And if for whatever reason Georgia's defense has an off day and the offense can't keep up with that Mississippi State, Georgia's offense can't match Mississippi State's offense, I could see a scenario here where Georgia loses this game. How confident am I in that pick that Georgia loses on the road to Mississippi State? Less than 10%. Georgia's going to be a huge favorite in that game. I don't know which game Georgia's going to lose, to be honest with you. I just think they're going 11-1. And when I look at the schedule at Mississippi State, makes more sense to lose than any other game I can see. At Kentucky the following week, they're a better team than Mississippi State. There's no doubt about it, and there's no question about it. And if Kentucky only has a couple of losses or maybe one loss by this point in the season, it's going to be a crazy environment up there. It's going to be cold. That could be a tricky game. However, unlike some of these other teams, Kentucky, I don't think offensively has what it takes to beat Georgia. They've been trying to move in that direction over the last couple of years, getting a better quarterback in Will Levis, who I really, really like, but he just doesn't have the weapons. They lost Wan'Dale Robinson. I know they brought a transfer in, and he's probably going to have a good year, but I just don't think Kentucky has the ability to stretch the field horizontally and vertically like you need to do to beat Georgia. They're not going to be able to just line up and push Georgia off the line of scrimmage and run the ball 50 or 60 times. That's not going to work. And, I think Kentucky would beat Mississippi State, I think. No question about it. Kentucky might beat Tennessee. That's going to be a good game. It was a good game last year. Tennessee beat them last year 45-42, I think. I just don't think Kentucky – my issue with Kentucky isn't how good they are. It's a matchup issue with Georgia. They just don't have the playmakers on the outside, in my opinion, offensively to score enough to beat UJ. I think Georgia wins that game. And I already told you, I think Georgia just humiliates Georgia Tech for the umpteenth year in a row. So there you go. I've got Georgia going 11-1. DraftKings has the over-under at 10.5, so I guess put me down for the over. 11-1 with a loss on the road at Mississippi State. And again, I don't expect everybody to agree with me on this. I agree Georgia's much better than Mississippi State. It's just, it's so hard for me to pick anybody to go 12-0 just because I know how hard it is. You have to play at your best week in and week out. You can't take any weeks off. It's just really, really hard to do. So, if I think Georgia's going 11-1 and then I got to find the loss, it's almost like closing my eyes and just throwing a dart. I mean, they're just as likely, I guess, to lose at South Carolina as they are at Mississippi State. I don't know. The only thing that would really, and 12-0 wouldn't shock me either. 12-0 would not shock me at all, Georgia going 12-0. 9-3 would shock me. Like I said, if Georgia somehow, and I've heard people say Georgia's losing 3 games. I don't know what these people are smoking. If Georgia loses 3 games this year, it'll be one of the worst coaching failures in modern college football. Anyway, let me know down below what you think Georgia's going to do in 2022. And remember, not just the record. Let me know who it is you think they're going to lose to. I appreciate you watching, and have a good morning.